Whip James Clyburn took part in, of course, the civil rights movement, the sit-ins to desegregate Woolworths and all those other lunch counters. Let's talk about this. What was your reaction to the statement by Rand Paul, who now, of course, is the nominee for the Senate in Kentucky?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Andrea. I was absolutely appalled, but it started out a little bit earlier. I happened to be watching his victory speech. And I could not believe that he was holding his victory party in a private members-only club where the vast majority of the people who just finished voting for him would not even be welcome. I couldn't believe that. And then on the next day, I hear him making these statements about not believing in the efficacy of the Civil Rights Act. Here is a man who is answering 14th Amendment questions with Second Amendment responses. This is absolutely appalling. And now today he's put out a statement that limits his acceptance to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I want to say to him that voting rights are found in the 65 Civil Rights Act, that fair housing, which is private, in the 68 Civil Rights Act. And not until 1972 did we outlaw discrimination in the public sector. So once again, he is parsing his words. He is saying things, sending signals that I hope the vast majority of the people who voted for him would reject. And I am sure that come November they will.
Let me just read completely what he said, which you're just pointing out. He put out a statement today in reaction to his interview with Rachel, and he said, "I have clearly stated in prior interviews that I abhor racial discrimination and would have worked to end segregation." Well, he said that last night as well. "Even though this matter was settled when I was 2 and no serious people are seeking to revisit it except to score cheap political points, I unequivocally state I will not support any efforts to repeal the Civil Rights Act of 1964. These attacks prove one thing for certain. The liberal establishment is desperate to keep leaders like me out of office, and we are sure to hear more wild, dishonest smears during the campaign." So that was his statement today. Obviously, you've already pointed out that he referenced the 1964 Act, not the Voting Rights Act, not the Public Housing Act in 1972, and you want a clear statement from him as to what he really means in terms of civil rights.
That's exactly right. I say to people all the time, there was no one Civil Rights Act. We can go back to the 1860s and look at us, especially 1880s, trying to do civil rights laws. We have been working on these things over a period of time. Strom Thurmond, who was the senator from my state, filibustered, broke the record in the Senate, or set the record on filibustering against the 1957 Civil Rights Act. Now, I would say to Dr. Paul that he ought to come clean with the American people and let us know exactly what it is he wants to do if he's elected to the United States Senate. He made himself the face and the spokesperson for the Tea Party movement at his victory party on Tuesday night. And then he set out the next morning, yesterday, to laying out the philosophy of that movement. And I think that he made it very clear to the voters in America what that movement is all about. They are parsing words, they are sending signals, they are saying things that ought to give all of us great pause.
This is a little bit more of that interview with Rachel Maddow last night. Let's watch.
Do you think that a private business has a right to say we don't serve black people?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of any discrimination of any form. I would never belong to any club that excluded anybody for race. What about freedom of speech? Should we limit speech from people we find abhorrent? Should we limit racists from speaking? I don't want to be associated with those people, but I also don't want to limit their speech in any way in the sense that we tolerate boorish and uncivilized behavior because that's one of the things freedom requires.
Just to play devil's advocate for a moment, he's saying basically he's a libertarian. He doesn't believe in a lot of other things, federal regulation, in fact, of some of the drug laws, marijuana. He has some very interesting, quote unquote, interesting points of view here. So is it okay to say, well, I'm a libertarian, I'm not a racist, I'm a libertarian, that's why I don't believe in federal enforcement of these civil rights laws?
Well, let me say this. As you know, I was born and raised in a parsonage. I do believe that it's their deeds that define them, not their words. Here he is in the statement last night saying he did not believe in private clubs that discriminate against people. He would not be a member of a private club that discriminated against people. He held his victory party in a members-only private club. Now, I don't know if he's a member of that club or not. But I can tell you this, that club goes back, according to my research, to 1916. And so I know what that means. Most voters know what that means. And let me say something else about the so-called libertarian stuff. The fact of the matter is, we are where we are on Wall Street today because of a lack of the kind of regulation that he says he's against. We have problems going in the Gulf Coast right now, our environment being threatened, wildlife being eliminated, all fish and fowl, people, 16% of all the fishermen down there, or now I think it's 19%, are going to be out of work because of libertarian philosophy that we ought not be regulating the drilling of oil, or drilling for oil. So I would say to Mr. Paul, he just cannot have it both ways. He needs to lay out for the American people exactly who he is, what he is, and I do believe that he is not good for this country going forward.
Of course, thank you very much, Jim Clyburn, and we will, of course, ask Mr. Paul to come on. We have asked Dr. Paul, I should say, to come on and continue to explain himself. Thank you very much. Majority Whip Jim Clyburn. And coming up next, Politico's Jonathan Martin.